But over the past 7 months, a bipartisan panel of 23 members made up of the executive branch, the legislative branch, and private sector members worked extremely hard, meeting over 10 times throughout the state, getting input from Missourians of all types and from all parts of the state, and with the purpose of really evaluating our transportation system, making recommendations regarding its condition, making recommendations regarding its funding, and this task force has done a tremendous job of doing so. We've had tremendous members from the task force, from the private sector, that have brought some great experiences to the table, some tremendous knowledge in various areas that are important and pertinent to our transportation system. We've had executive branch members, including the staff of the governor, including our Director of Transportation, Patrick McKenna, our Superintendent of the State Highway Patrol, Colonel Sandra Karsten, as well as our Economic Development Director, Rob Dixon. And it's been tremendous to bring all those people together, in addition to the legislative members, with a common goal and purpose of following what was in the legislation from last year, HCR 47, to evaluate the condition of our transportation, including our roads and bridges, to evaluate the current transportation funding in Missouri. We released a report that we submitted to the General Assembly yesterday, January 1st, and hopefully you've had a chance to dive into that, or you will have a chance to. But it's a summary of the activities and the recommendations of the task force. It really follows kind of three parts that this task force was purposed to do. First of all, we had a tremendous amount of research and information into the state transportation system. And so over the last 7 years, this task force has diligently dived into all kinds of areas of transportation, including roads and bridges and vehicles and the coming age of different electric vehicles and shared use vehicles, and just all kinds of aspects that this transportation task force has dived into. So in an effort of accountability and transparency, this task force has put a report that reflects that, the overall transportation system that we have in Missouri. And it goes through a tremendous amount of information that this task force learned over 10 meetings and over 7 months, and many presentations. And so it tries to synthesize that information. It also goes into the other job of this task force to kind of evaluate where our transportation system is and where we believe the people of Missouri believe it is. And this task force heard from more than 100 people across the state of Missouri and public testimony that shared with us all different ideas and opinions on the transportation system. But one thing was clear, that our people of Missouri are not satisfied with the state of our transportation system now, that they believe that although our Department of Transportation, our government has done a good job of doing what they can in terms of maintaining and working with our transportation system, that Missourians would like to see more of an optimal system. They believe that we are positioned in such a way to be a real transportation hub, to be a logistics leader, and to have a world-class transportation system. And just isn't where we need it to be, and so we were able to evaluate that. And then the third part of the report and the job of this task force was then to make recommendations as far as funding and as far as the transportation system in general. And to that end, we have put forth both some immediate impact investment opportunities. We believe that the people of Missouri would like to see a greater investment in transportation, and our transportation needs a shot in the arm, and so there's some immediate impact investment recommendations that are made there. At the same time, we recognize that the landscape of transportation is changing. And as to 10, 15 years down the road, and as we get into decades to come, we have to have more reliable, sustainable, and diversified revenue streams to fund our transportation system. So we make recommendations in our report regarding that. and many ideas that we believe the legislature can consider and begin to implement to begin to make sure that we have the kind of funding that a world-class transportation system needs. And then we also make some recommendations in terms of safety legislation and innovation to make sure that our roads, our highway system are safe for Missourians, and that we can be on the forefront of innovation to both improve safety as well as improve economic opportunity in the state. We have a number of our members here today, and I'll open it up to some questions, and then we can, feel free to, if there's a particular member that you'd like to address to, that they can answer some questions as well. But why don't we, I want to say real quickly, just again, to thank our task force members so much for their efforts over the last 7 months. They've been incredibly diligent, both coming to meetings, sitting through the testimony, asking probing questions, as well as working at home and beginning to inform themselves as much as possible on the issues, and working with their community members and meeting with other stakeholders and interested citizens on their ideas for transportation. With that, I'll open it up to some questions.
Corlew,
yes.
So it's 10 cents a gallon gasoline increase and 12 cents for diesel, is that correct?
What the task force has recommended is that the legislature would send to the people, for the people of Missouri to be able to decide this issue, and has recommended them asking the people to consider a vote of increasing the gasoline tax of 10 cents and the diesel by 12 cents. One of the things that we learned in this process was that the purchasing power of our gas tax has gone down over the years. We have a static volumetric gas tax that's at 17 cents a gallon. That has not changed since the mid-90s. And yet inflation has changed. And so the same purchasing power that 17 cents had in 1996 is now only 8 cents. And so just to keep up with inflation, we need an adjustment. And that adjustment would be to 27 cents to keep it at the same value that it had in the mid-1990s when it was last raised.
What gives you confidence that the voters will approve such a package?
We are confident that based on what we heard in the task force meetings, based upon the input that we received, that one thing was clear, that a greater investment in our transportation system is needed. And the most often cited recommendation to us by the people of Missouri was to look at the gas tax. And there's good reason for that. People understand how it works. There's a tremendous nexus between filling up your car and then getting on the roads. They understand that we are low in terms of our tax burden, our motor fuel tax burden in terms of the rest of the country. We're ranked at 46 in the nation in having in terms of gas tax. So we've got the 4th lowest gas tax in America currently, and we could still be very competitive with all of our surrounding states, even with just simply adjusting the gas tax for inflation. And so we're confident that the people of Missouri that spoke to us would support that effort. At the same time, we're confident that we'll continue to work and find as many solutions as possible and continue to listen to the people of Missouri.
The report states that
has there been any discussion with the governor's office, with the governor, about supporting the user fee of gas tax increase?
Yes, throughout this process, we have worked with both the governor's office and with legislative leaders on both sides of the both chambers to be able to make sure that we're working through ideas that would be viable, that would be workable. I can't speak for the governor particularly on what his position would be on that, but I know that they've expressed a desire to be able to have an overall tax policy discussion and state budgeting priorities, and we've put that in our report as well, recognizing that policymakers will probably want to have a broader tax policy discussion than just what the transportation task force has put forth. But we're confident that the user-based approach is the way that Missourians would go.
Was his support requested?
As it says in our task force report, executive branch members were asked to be a part of the task force to give their expertise, their subject matter. They are in charge of enforcing and carrying out any policies. So it was tremendously important to have their input into all the suggestions that we made. But the executive branch members did not make specific policy recommendations.
The
a question?
report says that this would generate about, raising the gas tax would generate about $430 million a year. But the report also states that the funding gap each year is about $825 million. So you still have a $400 million gap, unless I'm misreading something.
Well, the task force found that over the course of years, we have developed a funding deficit in terms of getting the priorities that need to be met. And there are about $825 million annually of unfunded priorities in transportation. The task force recognizes that that's a sizable issue, a sizable problem that needs to be addressed. However, we didn't get to this place overnight, and our recommendations don't envision that we'll get out of that hole overnight. But what this does, what the amount that we've recommended for the people of Missouri to consider would be $430 million annually to the State Road Fund. That's $4.3 billion over 10 years. That will be a significant foothold into the future to make sure that we're meeting our transportation obligations. You add that to the multiplier effect that transportation has. Nearly every economist that talked to us cited at least a 3-to-1 investment, and some said even up to 4 to 10-to-1 investment in terms of transportation. So you're looking at billions of dollars into the economy over 10 years, which will help improve safety, which will help fix our roads and bridges, help grow the system, relieve congestion in areas where it's needed, make sure that our goods can get from the fields to the market, or from the manufacturers to the market, and at the same time create tremendous economic opportunity and jobs. So that we're making a terrific step forward. In addition, besides the road fund, the task force has recommended that we have a dedicated revenue stream for multimodal, and that's a tremendous investment that can be made, not a huge investment, but will have some huge outcomes and economic results from that.
So on that, the $50 to $70 million in multimodal, you're suggesting that we dedicate that funding without raising any taxes. How would we do that, given that times are tight with our state budget already? So money has to come from elsewhere.
Right. We looked at a few different options, and one of them that we looked at was the idea of taking the 2% timely filing discount that is currently given on retail sales taxes. That's kind of an outdated mode from the 1930s, which involved businesses recouping 2% of the retail sales taxes to help pay for the collection of that. In an age of computers and quick software and a click of the button, that sometimes can create a windfall to businesses. So we're not suggesting that should be done away with, but we're suggesting that the legislature could look at that. That's the second most generous percentage in America, so we could look at that, restructure that, and we think that we could, through restructuring that we could get the 50 to 70 million. That would be an incredibly important aspect of our multimodal. There are other options to look at too, and I think the legislature will look at that, but I think it's important that we look for ways that are already within the taxes that are given by the Missourians, that there's places in there that we can pay and give greater investment to multimodal.
And just the timely filing portion of the tax code has been identified by several other legislators looking to fund other priorities, including legislators who are just hoping to cut income taxes and use that as a balancing tool. The gas tax has also been mentioned as a balancing tool for an income tax decrease. How do you convince people that this priority for that is more important than, say, repealing the timely filing discount and putting the money into school transportation, or the home care cuts that have been made? How do you convince people that this is a higher priority than those other services?
There are a lot of well-meaning priorities that our state has. However, in every meeting that I've been a part of, when I meet with community groups and have for the last over the last decade, is that one issue has transcended them all, and that has been, what are we going to do about our transportation system? What are we going to do about our roads and bridges? That people want to make sure their kids can get to school safely, that people can make sure to get to their jobs on a timely basis and reliable transportation, that our manufacturers can get their goods to the market, whether they're in St. Louis or Kansas City, whether they're a farmer outside of Sedalia that needs to get their goods to St. Louis. It's a tremendously important part of the fabric of Missouri, our transportation system. It intersects with every part of life. And so although there are a lot of well-meaning issues and issues that frankly are priorities, transportation is something that we've been kicking the can down the road for many years, and I'm confident that we can make the case that we can find the money needed, in particular to your question, for multimodal.
So the report being released on the 1st of January, most of us did not have a chance to read it or even probably bother to look for it online yesterday. So I'm going to be asking a question that shows my ignorance of what's in the report. And that is, what big things will Missourians get if they approve this gas tax? Will they get 3 lanes on I-70 in all directions? Will they get 3 lanes on I-44 across the state? Will they get high-speed rail between Kansas City and St. Louis? Will they get the Hyperloop? What will we get in big picture, big project things out
Right.
of this if it's approved?
Well, there are a few things that have been identified within the report, things that need to be done. One is to improve roads and bridges just generally. As of the past few years, when we've been able to just maintain it, we've seen bridges that are in poor condition or in critical condition or weight restricted bridges. So there's some general work that just needs to be done to make sure that our roads are safe and that they're reliable. In addition to that, we can begin to rebuild the interstate system that has been tremendously important. You know, our interstate system was built back in started in the late 1950s, the first stretch of interstate highway system here in Missouri. And we've continued to build that out over 60 years, but some of those stretches have 20-year lifespans that need to be rebuilt. And we need to start doing so. We can't keep putting it off as we have been doing. In addition, there are areas in the state that deal with congestion on a daily basis, that the additional money will be able to build additional lanes to be able to relieve congestion. There's places such as the I-270 corridor that have been tremendously in need of repair to make sure to keep up with the economic movement on those. And so, what any type of proposal that would go to the people would envision would be a process in which our Department of Transportation, in conjunction with our regional planning organizations, would seek the input of Missourians throughout the state and find out what are the key aspects, key projects that need to get done in your area. So our task force heard of some of them. In Kansas City, we heard over and over that the Buck O'Neill Bridge needs to be replaced. In central Missouri, we heard a need for the Roachport Bridge that at some point in the near future that will need to be looked at. In St. Louis, we heard about the I-270 corridor. In southwest Missouri, we heard about I-49 and a stretch that still needs to be completed going down into Arkansas. These are all projects that the task force believes could be done with this type of additional investment. But at the same time, there are areas of need that working in conjunction with our local regional planning organizations, with elected officials and with people, that they'll be able to identify the key projects that will be done with this investment in their area.
So you don't think of big imaginative ideas to capture people's interstates? Why not tolls on interstate trucks? A lot of studies have found that a significant portion of the problems on the interstates is the interstate trucks traveling through Missouri. Why not put tolls on them?
Well, in our report, there is a recommendation that has tolling in some limited fashions. Over the past several years, there have been legislative proposals that have put out that would allow tolls to rebuild and portions of our interstate. That hasn't got a lot of traction within the legislature. And this task force has been cognizant that of the ideas that we put forth, we want to make sure that they can be achieved. And not only are they ideas that we've come up with, but ideas the legislature can actually take and look at. And so tolling, to the extent that we have considered tolling, it's been in a couple areas. One has been in metropolitan areas to be able to allow some additional express managed lanes, which is an additional lane that could be built with an optional opportunity for someone to get in that, relieve congestion, have a quicker trip time, and pay a toll to do so. We've also suggested that the legislature look at major bridge tolling. We've got over 200 major bridges in the state, and many of them are coming time to be due to be able to begin to replace. But when you talk about a major bridge, you're talking about at least $200 million, and if not more, to be able to replace that. So when you do that, one of the options could be that communities and the state, working in partnership, could actually at least consider whether tolling would be an option for that for that bridge construction.
You propose to raise revenues by only half of the need. How do you propose to get the other half of the need paid for?
Well, as far as the immediate impact investment that we've recommended, which would be in the neighborhood of about $480 million with the multimodal and the motor fuel road portion of that, and that would give us definitely a boost, a shot in the arm. Over 10 years, you're talking about more than $4 billion put into transportation, and that would enable us to start moving down the road, get a lot of these projects that are taken care of, and begin to move forward. At the same time, I want to make sure that we highlight that a significant part of this report talks about sustainable revenue in the future. So we've talked about things such as vehicle fees, towards the legislature looking at the opportunity to have some type of an equivalence with electric charges to be able to recoup a tax upon electric, similar to the way you would on gas. We've talked about the express managed lanes, the bridge tolling, other opportunities like that. So we have several different options that we've suggested that the state look at. And as we do so, those will be more revenue that will come into the system that will be able to be used for our transportation. So although the immediate impact investment has a significant number of close to $500 million annually, we also recommend many other options that will increase the revenue streams and be able to grow our transportation system.
You mentioned minutes ago that one of the objectives was something that was achievable. Is this proposal you're putting forward achievable either in the legislature or with the public, the voters, who ultimately have to approve it, without the support of the governor or the Transportation Commission endorsing it?
Well, I think it's important to have the support of all of our leaders on this, and to that end, we'll be working through the legislative process. This has just been step one, but the step two is being able to talk to the legislature, and the legislature is unable to raise this type of revenue, but we will ask the legislature to ask the people of Missouri to get involved. And I think as we do so, as they see the benefits that will result from improved safety, from economic development. We're talking about improvements that can be made that will impact generations to come, not only in terms of safety, but also economic growth to this state. And we believe as we do so, that we'll be able to see a viable solution forward. So.
Taken on a couple of groups that have fairly significant lobbying presences here in the Capitol. You're asking for the first time a differential on diesel, which has been tried before and failed because of the truckers' lobby. You're also asking to reduce or eliminate the early filing allowance for people who pay sales tax, and that's also been tried before and failed in the face of business lobbying. Will you be disappointed if this program ends up with just a simple fuel tax increase, same for both, and none of the other things you're talking about?
The job of this task force has been to become informed as much as possible of the transportation issues and to make recommendations regarding our transportation system and regarding our funding. This task force has done a diligent job and yeoman's job of doing so. So what this task force has, I wouldn't be disappointed in this process at all, because these members have shown just an incredible opportunity, incredible task of doing forth and setting forth these recommendations. In an effort of accountability and transparency, we've put that in our report, and we're going to be working towards that, and we're going to make the case to the Missourians that this is the way, but we believe, based upon our hearings, that we should move our transportation system forward. At the end of the day, it'll be up to the people of Missouri to decide, and we're confident and hopeful that we can make the case to them of the need. Yet at the same time, if the people of Missouri were to say, no, that's not the way that they think they should be done, then it'd be our job as elected officials and leaders to be able to sit down again and to find viable solutions, and we're confident we can do so.
Chairman Corlew, I want to ask you about the primary seatbelt law, because that got a lot of attention. Colonel Karsten talked about a trooper who had to dive out of the way into a pickup truck, et cetera, down in Rolla. Are you optimistic about the primary seatbelt law, and would that go through the legislature, or are you looking to put that on the ballot?
More than likely through the legislature. This is something, one of the jobs of our task force became to look at the overall safety in the state of Missouri. We were ranked 50th or last in terms of a safety report by the National Safety Council, and that was in large part about some of the legislation that dealt with driver behavior. One of the things that we found in our hearings was that a primary seatbelt law increases seatbelt use by about 7%. So that was a recommendation that the task force had, that we would have a primary seatbelt here, because it's very important that we keep our highways as safe as possible for every motorist out there. Just one or two more, and then we need to wrap up.
I think it's going to be a hard sell, especially on increasing user fees and getting a fuel tax passed.
Well, you know, user fees are the primary way that we have funded our transportation system throughout the history of this nation. It's a user-based approach. It's an approach that says that those who get the most benefit out of the roads are paying for them. And so I think the approach taken to base a lot of the recommendations on user-based is the right one. And these transportation issues have been difficult in the past. Obviously, we haven't changed our primary source of funding in more than 2 decades. So we understand it's a process. It's a complicated issue, but we're up to the task to move forward, and confident that we can make our case to legislatures to be able to inform them what we informed, and to be able to work through all those issues.
Did any members of the task force decline to sign the final report as supportive of it? Anybody who thought didn't?
No, well, the report was based on a general consensus approach, and so all the ideas that we had in there are ones that, through our meetings and through the process, received the overall general support of the task force. We did allow people to, if they would like, to submit a letter, and there are, I think, 4 letters that were submitted, and with individual comments. But overall, generally speaking, these are the recommendations in the task force. Thank you so much. Want to? Well, I'm hopeful they will, and it's as I stated earlier, it has not only in their specific recommendations, but the information gleaned. All of that is important to making our decision. Did anybody else have any comments to make? So, well, thank you again for coming. Thank you for your interest in this effort, and I want to thank my colleagues again for their work on the task force. Thank you.